Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's doing fantastic. This is Wayland Baptist University Advanced College Algebra Quiz 3. We're going to continue with some of the concepts that we did last week, but now we're also starting quadratic equations. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the quiz. Remember, I do the odds, you get to do the evens. Make sure that you follow along very closely. So, let's take a look at question number one. Question number one says x plus 7 is equal to 0. What we're going to do is we're going to subtract 7 from both sides, and we're going to get x equals negative 7. Final answer. So you should be able to do number 2 very fast. Remember, you got to do the opposite. So if I'm adding, I subtract. If I'm subtracting, I add. Okay? Very simple. All right, now let's take a look at question number 3. Question number 3 says x squared equals 9. Now, just like we countered addition with subtraction, we're going to have to counter squaring with the inverse function of it. So if I have y equals x squared, the inverse of it would be y equals the square root of x. So I would have to take the square root of both sides like this. But when you do, you're going to have to put a plus or minus right there. That's how it works. So I'm going to get x equals plus or minus the square root of 9. Now, the square root of 9 is the concept that you have to apply and think a little bit. You have to think two numbers that multiply times each other that gives you 9. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is 3 times 3 is equal to 9. Everybody knows that. So 3 is one of the answers, but it's not the only answer because negative 3 times negative 3 also gives me 9. So that's why we have this plus or minus here, because x is going to equal to plus or minus 3. Final answer. All right. Now, if you were using a calculator, you just press the square root key on 9, okay? But don't forget, negative 3 also works. Your calculator is not going to give it to you. You're going to have to use a little bit of logic. Okay, you get to do number 4. I'll do number 5. So problem number 5 says VE is equal to 1/2 mv squared. This is a physical phenomena. This is kinetic energy, right? We're solving for B. Solving for B. So your goal is simple. Your goal is to leave V alone. All right, so the way you're going to leave V alone is to counter everything you see. See, if I'm dividing by 2, I would multiply both sides by 2. That's how you would counter it. So notice what happens. 2 times 1/2, they cancel. And I'm going to have 2VE equals mv squared. We're almost there. Now we got to get rid of the m. Notice that there's a multiplication. So the reverse process or the inverse process would be to divide by m. So far we have 2VE over m is equal to v squared. Now by symmetry, we can rewrite this with VE, sorry, not VE2, VE on the left side. And so by symmetry, we can do this. Oh, this is just regular V, sorry. That's just regular V. So V squared is equal to 2VE over M. And just like we had before, you know how we had x squared is equal to 9 and we took the square root of both sides? The same thing is going to happen here. We're going to take the square root of this side and we're going to take the square root of this side, but when we do, we're going to put a plus or minus. So the square and the square root are going to cancel. This is not VE, this is V. Okay, so this is going to become V equals plus or minus the square root of 2VE over M. final answer. I know my head's in the way, but and then they do something extra. Here's some extra work. Uh, the answer is D because, let me show you why. There's some extra work that needs to be done. So if V is equal to plus or minus the square root of 2VE over M, there's a rule that says that you cannot, let me see if I can scroll up. Let me scroll up a little bit here, so my head's not in the way. Okay, so D is the answer, and let me demonstrate why. Okay, so far we have this, right? But there's a rule. The rule is no square roots on the denominator. So we're gonna have to do an extra step. We're gonna have to split this into two parts. We're gonna have to split it into the square root of 2VE over the square root of M. Okay? And this is because the square root of A over B is equal to the square root of A over the square root of B. This is an algebraic rule. All right, now that we split it in the top and bottom, there's something else that you need to know. If I have some number over the square root of M, the way you can fix this so that you don't have any square roots on the bottom is by multiplying top and bottom by the same thing that you have on the bottom. You might say, how does this make it better? Well, because what's going to happen is you're going to have two of these, and you're basically going to have that this times this is just going to give you M on the bottom. And notice that you're not going to have any square root on the bottom, and you fixed the rule no square roots on the bottom. So what are we going to do here? We're going to do plus or minus the square root of 2VE over square root of M. We're going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of M. Okay? And we're going to get V equals plus or minus. And you can put them together in one square root also, the top part. And then the bottom, this times this. If I have the square root of A times the square root of A, it's going to equal to A. So that means this is M, because the square root of M times the square root of M is M. And notice now it looks like the answer choice D. The only thing is they reversed. Multiplication is commutative. That means that 3 times 4 is the same thing as 4 times 3. So you can rewrite this as 2MVE over M. Final answer. Answer choice D. Okay. Okay, let me help you with number 6, because I know these are not easy to do the first time you do them. So let me go ahead and help you, okay? So we have an area is equal to 5 pi A squared. Solve for A. So what we do is we divide both sides by 5 pi. So I got A squared equals A over 5 pi. And again, we apply the same rule. We take the square root of both sides, and we put a plus or minus like this. But again, it's not allowed to have a square root on the bottom, because look what happens. The square root and square cancel. We got plus or minus the square root of A over the square root of 5 pi. So what you need to do is you need to multiply top and bottom by 5, square root of 5 pi. And so A is going to equal to plus or minus the square root of, and I think in the case of number 6, they write it like 5 pi A over 5 pi. Final answer. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and do number 7. Number 7 says solve the equation using the quadratic formula. So the first thing that we need to remember is, what is the quadratic formula? So the quadratic formula is the following. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And you might say, what is this formula for? Well, this formula is to find roots. So if I had a graph like this, you want to know where this crosses and where this is x1 and this is x2. Those are my two roots. Where does the parabola cross the x-axis? Okay, that's what it's for. All right, so if we look at question number 7, they tell me that we have 3x squared equals negative 12x minus 5. So the first thing that I need to do is zero out the right side. And how? I just counter it by doing the opposite. So if I'm subtracting, I add. If I'm subtracting, I add. But whatever I do to one side, I do it to the other side. And now these three things are very different, so you cannot combine them. So you just write them next to each other. Okay, this is what's called zeroing out one side. This is 0. Okay, so then what? By the zero factor property, we can apply the quadratic formula. So A is 3, B is 12, and C is 5. And now we're going to use that formula up there. X is going to equal to negative B, so negative 12, plus or minus the square root of 12 squared, because it says b squared, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a. All right? So then x is equal to negative 12 plus or minus 144. Then you take your handy dandy calculator. Well, it's 4 times 3 times 5 is 60, right? Minus 60. All right, and then we're going to be all over 6. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it over 2a, just because you will see that the 2 is going to cancel with numbers on top in a minute. Okay, 144 minus 60. What is that? 144 minus 60 is 484, right? 84 happens to be 4 times 21, right? So 84 is equal to 4 times 21. You might say, but why is that important? Well, because, hear me out. This turns into 84, right? And we have a 2 times 3 on the bottom. And 84 is 4 times 21. So we can write this as negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 21 all over 2 times 3. And you might say, where are you going with this? Well, we're going that the square root of 4 is known. Square root of 4 is 2. So this turns into negative 12 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 21 all over 2 times 3. Now here's the catch. 2 can go into 2 one time, and 2 can go into 12 6 times, and there's a negative. So look, this is going to be my final answer. Negative 6. How did I get negative 6 again? Negative 12 divided by 2, because 2 goes into 12 6 times. 2 goes into 2 one time. So I'm going to have plus or minus the square root of 21. The 3 doesn't go anywhere. And that's my final answer. Negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 21. It's going to be answer choice A. Okay? So just make sure that when you do number 8, you follow the steps closely. First, you got to zero it out. Next, you got to call out what each one is. The first one is A. the second one is b, and the third one is c. So it looks like this: ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, that's the general form of the quadratic. So the coefficient in front of the x squared is your a, the coefficient in front of the x is your b, and c is just the number 5 in this case. Then once you know a, b, and c, you're supposed to use this formula and substitute. So instead of putting a b, you're going to put a 12. It's negative b, so it's negative 12. It's going to be plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. All right. That's how you do number 7. Now let's go ahead and go to number 9. Number 9 looks like a fun problem. Find two consecutive even integers whose product is 728. So two consecutive even integers. So x is the first number, and then the second number would be x plus 2, and their product is 728. You might say, well, why x plus 2, Mr. Leal? Well, because they're even integers. So if I have a 4, to get to the next number, I have to add 2 to get to 6. Do you agree? If I'm at 8, I have to add 2 to get to the next even number, which would be 10, right? Then you're going to distribute x squared plus 2x. X times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. Then you're going to zero out the right side. X squared plus 2x minus 728 equals 0. Then what? Well, then we're going to use the quadratic formula again, right? Quadratic formula, what does it say? X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Make sense? All right. All right, let's apply the quadratic formula. So a is 1, b is 2, and c is negative 728. Let's substitute. X is equal to negative b, so negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. But something nice is going to happen. Two negatives are going to turn into a positive. Okay, that's what's going to be nice about this one. Over 2a, so 2 times a is 1. Well, 2 times 1 is 2. So that's very nice. All right, so let's continue doing a little bit of algebra here. We got 2 squared is 4. And then negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 728. What is negative 728 times 4? We can use our calculator, right? 728 times 4. It's 2912. But it's going to be positive, right? Because two negatives make a positive, which makes this problem nice. Then what? Well, we add 4 to 2912. And we get 2916. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2916 over 2. Then I just take my calculator and I got to make it scientific. So I got to put my phone sideways, and then I'm going to do square root of it, right? I get 54. It's this one right here. The square root is this button that says square with a little 2 on it. Okay, so the square root of 2916 is 54. So x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus 54. Now, don't put the square root again. Some people put the square root one more time. No, once you took the square root, there is no more square root. You already did it. All right, and then there's going to be two situations, right? There's going to be where I add 54 and then divide by 2. Then I'm going to subtract 54 and then divide by 2. So if I add 54 to negative 2, I'm going to get 52 over 2. And 52 over 2 is going to be 26. Okay? That's one scenario. The second scenario is where I subtract 54. Remember, there's two situations. So I'm going to get negative 56 over 2, which is negative 28. So there's two scenarios, right? Now, in the first scenario, 26 times something is got to give me 728. Well, that something has to be 28, right? Because remember, they're consecutive even numbers. So if this is the first number, wouldn't the second number just be plus 2, right? Consecutive evens. So that means my answer would be 26 and 28. Does that make sense? Now, the same thing happens over here with this negative 28. The second one would be plus 2. But in that case, adding 2 to negative 28 makes it less negative. Okay? So those are my two answers right there. Now, nobody puts, for some reason, they put the negative 26 on the left side, but it doesn't matter where. There is no specific order. As long as you have the 26, the 28, or the negative 28 and the negative 26. They don't have to be in any specific order. These two numbers will multiply to 728, and these two numbers will multiply to 728. All right, so you get to do number 10. And obviously, some of you are probably thinking there's a shorter way to do this. I can just take the answers and multiply them and see if they give me the answer. And you are correct. Your brain's telling you the truth. Okay, I'll do number 11. You do number 12. Let me scroll this up a little bit because I'm already getting in the way again. Number 11 says, find two consecutive odd integers. Okay, so now they're odd. They're not going to be evens. Whose product is 255. But you know what's funny? You treat them the same because odds are 2 away from each other, just like evens. All right, but their product is 255. I'm going to distribute. I'm going to get x squared plus 2x equals 255. I'm going to subtract 255 from both sides so I can zero out the right side. I'm going to get x squared plus 2x minus 255 equals 0. And again, I'm going to have to apply the quadratic formula. Okay, the quadratic formula is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So a is 1, b is 2, and c is negative 255. All right, so let's apply the formula. It's going to be negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times a times negative 255, which was c, all over 2 times 1. 2a, a is 1. Now here's, we're going to do a little bit of math. We get negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus, and then what's 255 times 4? 255 times 4 gives me 1020, but it's going to be plus 1020. You see why? 1020, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Over 2. Now, it's going to be positive because a negative times a negative gives me a positive. And then this turns into negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 1024 all over 2. But the square root of 1024, if I turn my calculator sideways, oops, turned it off. Turn my calculator sideways. If I do 1024 and then I press the square root button, I get 32. Okay? So this is x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus 32. Do not put the square root again because you already finished with it. Once you take the square root, the action's already taking place. You do not put the square root symbol anymore. Some people put the square root again. No, you're not going to take the square root and then the square root again. So now we got to do two things. We got to add 32. So negative 2 plus 32 gives me 30. And 30 divided by 2 is 15. So 15 should be one of the answers. And to get the next one, I would do 15 plus 2. And 15 plus 2 is 17. So that's one of the sets. But remember, you got to also do the negative. So it's going to be negative 2 minus 32 over 2, which is negative 34 over 2, which is negative 17. And so my two answers are negative 17 and negative 17 plus 2. But in this case, when you add 2 to a negative 17, you're going to go down to a negative 15. All right? So those are my two answers. So you get answer choice D. Answer choice D. All right, you do number 12. I'll get to do number 13. 13 says the sum of squares. Okay, the sum of squares are two consecutive integers. So we have two consecutive integers. We have x squared plus x plus 1 squared is equal to 685. Find the integers. Of course, I'm going to teach you a shortcut just because you deserve to know a shortcut by now. You can just go to the answer choices, obviously, right? And you could just say, well, 18 squared plus 19 squared, what is that? This is 324 plus 361 equals, right? And so when I add these two, I get a 5, I get an 8, I get a 6. So yes, so 18 and 19 work, but you know what else works, guys? You're not gonna believe it. The negatives also work, because a negative times a negative also gives me a positive, and a negative times a negative also gives me a positive, and it's gonna give me 685. So they both work. So the shortcut is to just take your answer choices and square them and see if they work, and they do work. The two answers are that and that, okay? So that's the shortcut. But now let me teach you the long way in case you want to know the long way, right? So this becomes x plus 1 times x plus 1 equals 685. And then this becomes x squared plus, and then you do first times first, x squared. You do outer, you get x. You do inner, you get x. You do last, you get 1. And then you combine like terms. I got an x squared, I got an x squared, that's 2x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 685. Then you're going to subtract 685 from both sides. You're going to get 2x squared plus 2x minus 684 equals 0. And what I'm going to do to make my life easier, because they're all divisible by 2, I'm going to just divide everything by 2. So you're going to get x squared plus 2, no, not 2x, minus 342 equals 0. And it turns out that you can factor these things, right? Because 18 times 19 happens to be 342. Or you could use a quadratic formula if you want to, right? A is 1, B is 1, C is negative 342. So that means x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus, and this becomes 342 times 4, 1368. So 1 plus 1368 over 2 plus 1, 1369. And this, so I take 1369 and I press the square root and I get 37. So this turns into negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1369. And the square root of 1369 is 37. So then I add 37 to negative 1. So negative 1 plus 37 over 2 gives me 36 over 2, which is 18. And then because they're consecutive integers, your answer is 18 and 19. And then you also do the minus, so negative 1 minus 37 over 2. This is negative 38 over 2, which is negative 19. Negative 19. You add 1 to negative 19, you get negative 18. So those are my four answers: 18 and 19, negative 18, and negative 19. I mean, you can choose to do the shortcut if you want to, or you could just use the quadratic formula, whatever you like. Let's go to 15. I'm going to do 15. You're going to do 16. Okay, 15 says the sum of squares of two consecutive even integers. It turns out that that it's going to be x squared plus x plus 2 squared is equal to 884. Now you could also do the shortcut on this one. What's the shortcut? Well, I just go to my answer choices and I go, okay, what are my answer choices? And they have to be even numbers. Come on, right? So 21 and 23 are not even. Now let me scroll up again. I think my head's in the way of the answer choices. Now let me scroll up. Okay. Oops, I scrolled up too much. All right, so for sure it can't be A, right? Because those are odd numbers. It says the sum of squares of two consecutive even integers. So it's either going to be C, B, or D. And to make a long story short, it's got to be D, right? You know why? I mean B, not D. It's got to be B because 20 times 22 is 884. But you know what, guys? Negative 20 times negative 22 also gives me positive 884. Why? Because two negatives make a positive, okay? So that's the shortcut. Definitely apply that shortcut, right? Because the alternative is pretty long, right? Look, x squared plus x plus 2 times x plus 2 equals 884. And then x squared plus x squared. So first times first, outer, inner, last. Okay, I'm just doing first times first, and outer, then inner, then last. Then I'm going to combine like terms. And then I'm going to subtract 884 from both sides. So we're going to have 2x squared plus 4x minus 880 equals 0. And then they're all divisible by 2, right? So I can just divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. But I get x squared plus 2x minus 440. Okay? And we let a equal 1, b equals 2, c equals negative 440. So then I'm going to have x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. X is equal to negative 2 plus or minus 4 minus, and then 440 times 4, what is that? 440 times 4, that's going to be positive 1760 all over 2. And 1760 plus 4 is 1764. And guess what, guys? Negative 1764 is a perfect square. Let me demonstrate. If I just press the square root button, look what happens. Boom, it's perfect. 42. 42 times 42 is 1764. So this turns into negative 2 plus or minus 42 over 2. So there's two situations, right? X can either be negative 2 plus 42 over 2, which gives me 40 over 2, which is 2 or 20, right? And then so my second answer, because they're consecutive even integers, the second answer would be 20 plus 2. And 20 plus 2 obviously is 22. Those are two answers. But then you can also subtract 42. So it's negative 2 minus 42 over 2, which is negative 44 over 2, which is negative 22. And then when you add 2 to negative 22, it actually decreases the negative value. So it becomes negative 20. So these are my other two answers. Okay. I'm sure you're going to use the shortcut, but it's good that you know how to do it the long way. All right, let's go to, you do 16, I'll do 17. Okay. 17 says, find two consecutive integers whose product is 90. Two consecutive integers whose product is 90. So I have x, and x plus 1 is equal to 90. So this times that equals 90. So I'm going to distribute. I'm going to get x squared plus x equals 90. I'm going to subtract 90 from both sides. I'm going to get x squared plus x minus 90 equals 0. Then I'm going to let a equal 1, b equal 1, c equals negative 90. So x is equal to negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times negative 90, which is c, all over 2a. And this is going to turn into negative 1 plus or minus 1. And then two negatives make a positive, and this becomes 360, right? And it just so happens that 360 plus 1 is 361, which is a perfect square. 361 is the same thing as 19, right? The square root of 361 is 19. And so there's two situations. There's one where I add the 19 and then divide by 2, which is going to become 9, right? And if they're consecutive, it's going to be 9 and then 10. That's one scenario. But the other scenario is where I subtract 19 over 2. That's going to be negative 20 over 2, which becomes negative 10. And when I add 1 to negative 10 to get the next consecutive integer, I get negative 9. So those are my answers, this one and this one. Okay. And you get to do 18. I'll do number 19. So 19 says the sum of squares of two consecutive odd integers. So I have x, and the second one would be x plus 2. Think about it. If I have an odd number, I got to add 2 to get the next odd number. And their product is equal to 1570. Now, of course, the shortcut is super easy, guys. I can see the answer. I hope you can see it too. The answer is 27 times 29, which gives me 1570. And also negative 27 times negative 29, which gives me positive 1570. So these are super fast to do, right? Whichever has the four answers is going to be the answer, basically, right? But I'm going to go ahead and do it the long way, just to prove it to you, right? I'm going to subtract 1570 from both sides, 0 out the right side. I'm going to go ahead and apply the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. By the way, a is 1, b is 2, c is negative 1570. Okay, and it's going to be all over 2 times 1, obviously. So x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus, and it becomes a plus because it's two negatives make a positive. So it's going to be 4 times 1570. That's going to be 6280 all over 2 plus 4 gives me 6284. Now if you just click the square root button, oh, something happened. Did I do something wrong? 4 times 1570 equals 6280 plus 4. Take the square root. Whoa. Something's not right. The sum of squares. Oh, you're supposed to be squaring each one. Oh, excuse me. I didn't square them. I just multiplied them. All right. Let me do it again. Sorry about that. I read it, but I didn't do it. The sum of squares that are consecutive odd. Sorry about that. No wonder it wouldn't come out, right? Didn't read. I was doing the question, but not the correct question. Okay, let's quickly do it just to get this done. You're probably saying to yourself, but Mr. Lau, we're just gonna like use the shortcut. Why are you doing all the work? But I mean, it doesn't hurt to actually be able to do the work, right? So we're gonna have 2x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 1570. Subtract 1570 from both sides. So we have 4 minus 1570. I get 2x squared plus 4x minus 1566 equals 0. Divide everything by 2. I get negative 783. I get 2x. I get x squared. Okay, so A is 1, B is 2, C is negative 783. Okay, so x is equal to negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, then I take my calculator, I do times 4, I get negative 3130, but it's going to be positive, right? Not negative. It's going to be 4 plus 3132 over 2. And 3132 plus 4 is 3136 all over 2. And the square root of 3136 should be 56. So that's it. Negative 2 plus or minus 56 over 2. So if I add 56 and divide by 2, I'm going to get 54 over 2, also known as 27. And they're consecutive odd integers. So I would have to add 2 to get the next one, right? So it'd be 27 and 29. Okay, that gets me one answer. And then the other answer would be when I subtract 56. So that would be negative 58 over 2, which gives me negative 29. And then when I add 2 to negative 29, I'm going to get negative 27. There we go. Those are the 4 answers. All right, guys, pues that's it. Hopefully you're going to get it done very nice and easily. I think you might have found the pattern right to get the answers real easily. Good test takers find good answers, right? Quick answers to these things. You see the pattern. The one with the 4 numbers is usually the answer. Okay, guys. I hope you have an excellent weekend. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to text me. And that's it. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.